I wasn't supposed to be there. That's the part that's eating me alive. I wasn't supposed to see any of it. I wasn't supposed to walk into that overpriced steakhouse, smell her perfume in the air before I even saw her, and feel my knees lock in place as she laughed at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his forearm like it belonged there. But I was there. Because the printer jammed. That's it. That's the only reason. I had no grand plan. No suspicion. No gotcha moment. Just a jammed office printer and a missing flash drive. I remembered she borrowed it last week for some marketing slideshow. I figured I'd swing by her office on my way home, grab it from her desk, maybe leave a coffee on her chair with a dumb sticky note. That's it. But the office was dark. I double-checked the address on the front door like an idiot. Locked. No lights. No cars in the lot. And then I stood there for a solid minute, just blinking at the silence. She'd said, word for word, "Don't wait up, babe. Late pitch meeting. Might run past 10. It was 7:14. I called. No answer. I texted. The bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then came back, then gone again. I got in the car, sat there, engine running, hands frozen on the wheel. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just confused. A little embarrassed maybe. Like I'd walked in on a secret no one meant to hide from me, because no one thought I'd be curious enough to look. But I did. And now I can't unsee it. The restaurant was across town, tucked behind a glass art gallery. The kind of place that charges $28 for mashed potatoes and calls it rustic fusion. She hated that place. Called it pretentious. So why was she there? And why was he smiling at her like that? And why did she flinch like she'd seen a corpse when our eyes met across the room? She dropped her fork. He turned to look, confused. I stepped back into the hallway, just out of view, heart pounding like a snare drum inside my ribcage. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I stared down at it, at the text she'd just sent me. Only 10 seconds old. Heading into the meeting now. Love you. She typed that as she sat across from him, red wine in one hand, wedding ring still glinting under the table candlelight. I stood there for 10 whole minutes. I watched her adjust her hair, lean in closer, say something that made him laugh loud enough to make the table behind them turn. And then, I walked in. Not for drama. Not to cause a scene. But because I had to know. I had to see the look on her face when the lie finally collapsed. And when it did, she turned white. Like chalk. Like bleached fabric. Like a ghost of someone who used to be real. And that's when I realized she didn't expect to be caught. Not tonight. Not ever. The moment she saw me standing there, hands in my pockets, shoulders slumped like I didn't even have the strength to look angry. Everything inside her shattered. Not visibly. Not for the people watching. But I saw it. In her eyes. In the way she gripped the edge of the table, as if the wood might suddenly open up and swallow her whole. She didn't say my name. She didn't say anything at all. She just stared. The man sitting across from her, some Armani suit wearing cliché of a corporate golden boy, looked between us with the slow realization of a deer stepping into the middle of the highway. You know him? He asked, half laughing, as if this might all be some kind of awkward misunderstanding. I said nothing. I walked up to their table, slowly, not to cause a scene, but because my legs had stopped taking orders from my brain. I looked down at the table and saw 2 glasses of red wine, a shared plate of bruschetta, and her phone, turned face down. Of course it was. And on her finger, her wedding ring. Still there. Still on. Still glowing under the candlelight like it meant something. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Ellery, what are you doing here? I should have had a speech prepared. Some fiery monologue. Some devastating line to drop like a grenade between them. But all I could manage was, you said you were in a meeting. Her date blinked. Wait, is this your? I cut him off. She told me she'd be working late. Said she had a pitch meeting that might run past 10. I looked back at her. You even sent the text. Love you, remember? Just a few minutes ago. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The waiter, bless his unfortunate timing, arrived with a bottle of wine and 2 new glasses. He looked confused. Should I come back? No, I said. She was just leaving. Jess's face twisted. Not in guilt, but in panic. No. Ellery, please, just let me explain. It's not what it looks like. That's when I laughed. Genuinely laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the line was so cartoonishly predictable it felt like I was watching some low-budget soap opera starring the woman I thought I knew. You've had months to explain, I said. You had nights. You had mornings. You had every chance in the world to be honest. And instead, you're here. With him. The other guy stood up, looking nervous now. Look, man, I didn't know. I shook my head. You knew enough. Don't flatter yourself. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something in her expression. Not sorrow. Not regret. Annoyance. As if I was ruining the evening for her. As if I was the one who had done something wrong. That broke me more than the betrayal. I turned and walked out. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just hollow. As if I was leaking pieces of myself with every step I took toward the door. When I reached the sidewalk, the night air hit me like a slap. Cold. Sharp. Real. I got in my car. I stared at the steering wheel. And I waited. Not for her. Not for anything, really. I just sat there, parked across from that restaurant like a ghost staring into a window of a life that no longer belonged to him. 10 minutes later, she texted me. Please don't do anything crazy. I can explain. Just come home. But I wasn't home anymore. Not emotionally. Not spiritually. Not in any version of myself that she could reach. And I wasn't going to be. Not after what I saw next. I didn't go home that night. I drove. No destination, no map. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the dull ringing in my ears that hadn't stopped since I walked out of that restaurant. My hands were trembling so badly on the steering wheel I almost pulled over twice. I wasn't crying. I couldn't cry. I think I was too numb for that. Too hollow. Like my body hadn't caught up to the emotional damage yet. At some point, I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy, sitting in the dark, watching my breath fog up the windshield. And then, for reasons I can't fully explain, I circled back toward the restaurant. Not to go inside. Not to confront her again. But because I suddenly remembered where she'd parked. Her car was still there. Alone. I parked across the street. No sign of her or the guy. Maybe they left in his car. Maybe they were still inside, making toasts, pretending like that whole scene had never happened. It didn't matter. All I could see was that silver hatchback of hers, spotless as ever, even in the dim streetlight glow. And I had this thought. A stupid, impulsive, desperate thought. If she's hiding something, it might be in there. I know how that sounds. Like some jealous ex rifling through their partner's stuff. But I wasn't thinking like a husband anymore. I was thinking like a man who realized he'd spent years living inside a stranger's story. I tried the door. It was unlocked. The moment I opened it, her perfume hit me again. That same floral scent I used to love, back when it meant something. I sat in the driver's seat, heart pounding in my ears, and started opening compartments. At first, it was just the usual junk. Receipts. Lip balm. A pack of gum. A tiny bottle of dry shampoo. A used napkin with lipstick smudges. Nothing damning. Nothing unusual. But then I opened the glove box. And found the envelope. It wasn't labeled. Just plain white. Sealed. Tucked behind the manual like it had been wedged there in a hurry. I pulled it out, hesitating for a second. My name wasn't on it. But neither was anyone else's. It was hers. And that was enough. Inside were photos. Not printed from a phone. Actual developed photographs. Glossy. Sharp. Real. The first one hit me like a brick to the face. Jessa, in the same red dress, laughing in a hotel room bed, holding a champagne flute, with him beside her, shirtless. The second one, her kissing him, eyes closed, hand on his cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. The third, him, alone, sitting on our couch. Our couch. In our house. Wearing my hoodie. I stared at that photo for a long time. I think I stopped breathing. I think time folded in on itself. Everything around me dimmed like the world was slowly turning down its volume to let me sit in the quiet horror of that image. I flipped to the next photo, but this one wasn't of them. It was of a receipt. Dated a month ago. Hotel Indigo. 2 nights. 1 room. 2 breakfasts. I kept going. More photos. More evidence. Like she'd built her own private gallery of betrayal and forgotten to burn it. And then, at the bottom of the envelope, a card. Handwritten. From him. I wish you didn't have to pretend with him anymore. Love always, K. I put everything back exactly the way I found it. Every photo. Every scrap of betrayal. Then I locked the door and walked back to my car. Not because I was afraid of her finding out. Not because I wanted to protect her. But because I knew, deep down, that if I kept those photos, I'd do something reckless. I'd already seen enough. And yet, I hadn't seen anything yet. Because when I got home, at 3:17 in the morning, she was sitting on the stairs, mascara smudged, hands shaking, trying to spin some version of the truth she thought I might be dumb enough to swallow. And then she said something that nearly made me pass out. Ellery, I didn't mean for you to find out like this. I swear, I was going to tell you after the holidays. After the holidays. She said it like we were talking about changing a flight or canceling dinner plans. Not dismantling a life. After the holidays. That was the phrase that clung to me like smoke. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Calm. Tired. Like she was discussing a seasonal sale at the mall, not the nuclear implosion of our marriage. I stood in the hallway, soaking wet from the rain, my shoes tracking mud on the floor she used to care so much about, and I just stared at her. Like maybe if I stood still long enough, she'd morph back into the woman I used to love. She didn't. She stayed there on the steps, hands clutching each other like she was praying. She kept whispering that she was going to tell me, that it wasn't what it looked like, that she never meant to fall for him. I think she even said the word mistake at one point, but my ears were ringing too loud to be sure. The audacity to call what I saw, what I held in my hands earlier that night, a mistake. I thought we were done, she said quietly. You never told me that. I replied, my voice hoarse. I didn't have to, Ellery. You stopped touching me. You stopped noticing me. You haven't asked me how I'm doing in months. She said it like a weapon, and it worked. I felt it pierce straight through. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd been distant. Maybe I let work and anxiety and depression eat up all the warmth I had left. But cheating? Lying? Building a second life behind my back. How was that the solution? She wiped her eyes and stood. You don't know what it's like to feel invisible in your own home. I almost laughed again. Invisible? I hadn't felt seen in years. Every time I spoke, she was scrolling. Every time I reached out, she pulled away. Every effort I made felt like tossing stones into a black hole. But I didn't cheat. I didn't betray. I didn't destroy. I saw the photos, I said finally. Her face dropped like a glass shattering on concrete. What photos? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She knew exactly which ones. That's when her mask cracked. For the first time that night, her sadness twisted into something else. Panic. Not the panic of a guilty spouse, but the panic of someone who realized their plan had sprung a leak. What did you do with them? She asked. The change in her voice was immediate. Sharper. Less trembling. I put them back. She exhaled. Not in relief, in calculation. That's when it hit me. She hadn't kept those photos for sentiment. They weren't mementos of some forbidden love affair. She'd kept them for leverage. Or insurance. Or something darker I couldn't yet understand. I stepped closer. How long has this been going on? Her eyes darted, scanning me, the room, the front door. Ellery, don't do this right now. Please. How long? She shook her head. 6 months. Maybe more. But it's not serious. I blinked. Not serious? My voice cracked on the second word. You brought him into our house. She didn't deny it. I felt something shift inside me, like a thread snapping. Not rage. Not grief. Something colder. I stepped back, finally taking off my soaked jacket, and walked past her up the stairs. You don't get to sleep here, I said quietly. I don't care where you go. I don't care what he told you. But you are not sleeping in this house tonight. She didn't move at first. But then, slowly, she stood and walked toward the door. And just before she opened it, she turned to me with this look. Not hatred, not regret, but warning. I hope you know what you're doing, she said. She closed the door behind her. And I stood there, alone, in a house full of shadows. The next morning, I began looking through her office drawers. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe closure. Maybe more lies. Maybe something to confirm the gut instinct that had woken up inside me like a sleeping animal. That's when I found it. A manila folder, tucked beneath tax documents and warranty papers, labeled with her handwriting, Exit Strategy. Inside were printed bank statements, hers. A second checking account I didn't know existed. Monthly deposits from a name I didn't recognize. A P.O. box listed under her name, one I never noticed. But the last page? A typed letter addressed to a divorce attorney. Dated 3 weeks ago. Already signed. I just sat on the floor, folder in my lap, reading her words. I need to proceed quietly. My husband doesn't know. I'm worried about how he'll react if this catches him off guard. She was planning to leave me. Not just emotionally. Legally. Financially. Strategically. And the part that gutted me wasn't the affair. It was that I was never part of the conversation. I wasn't a person to her anymore. I was an obstacle. The folder didn't just rattle me, it gutted me. I sat on the bedroom floor, legs folded like a child in timeout, flipping through the paperwork with shaking hands, my eyes tracing each line over and over, as if repetition might soften the blow. The account was real. The letter to the attorney was real. The P.O. box existed. The signature at the bottom of the page was hers. And the part that made me feel like my chest was caving in, she'd already retained the lawyer. That meant calls had been made, consultations scheduled, strategies whispered in private, behind closed doors I didn't even know existed. She wasn't waiting to see how things went between us. She was executing a plan, and I was the last to find out, despite being its primary casualty. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind wouldn't stop spiraling. By dawn, I was at my laptop, trying to track down the mysterious name that appeared on every deposit in her secret account. The transactions were consistent. $1, $500 every other Friday. Too clean. Too precise to be a fluke. The name listed was Marlowe Systems, LLC. I'd never heard of it. No mutual friends. No ties to her company. Nothing in her emails. I Googled it. No official website. No business address. Just a handful of vague, near-empty directory listings online. A digital ghost of a company. I sat there for a minute, staring at the screen. Then I did something I never imagined myself doing. I called my cousin Graham. We hadn't talked in months, maybe longer. He's a quiet guy, kind of a loner, but he works in digital forensics. Big tech contracts, law enforcement gigs. The guy knows how to dig. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him everything. The affair. The photos. The fake account. The letter to the lawyer. The P.O. box. The mystery deposits. I expected judgment. Instead, there was a long pause, and then a low whistle. She's not just cheating, Graham said. She's building a firewall. I asked what that meant. He told me flat out. She's separating herself from you. Financially, legally, digitally. If she wanted to just leave, she could have walked. But this is a calculated detachment. She's setting up a story in case she needs to play the victim. My mouth went dry. What kind of story? Graham didn't hesitate. That you're unstable. That you're controlling. Maybe even abusive. I laughed. A dry, cracked, disbelieving sound. That's insane. I've never laid a hand on her. I barely even raised my voice. That's not the point, he replied. You don't have to be abusive. You just have to look unstable in the right moment. That's when my skin started to crawl. I remembered her telling friends I was forgetful, that I left cabinet doors open, misplaced keys, repeated myself. I remembered finding my prescription bottle moved from the bathroom to the kitchen. I remembered her joking at a party. Ellery's got early onset old man brain. While everyone laughed, and I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? Now I wasn't laughing. Graham offered to dig into Marlowe Systems, LLC for me. I told him yes. Immediately. Whatever it costs. Whatever he finds. Because something told me this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was a setup, and I'd already stepped into the trap. At noon, Jessa came home. She walked in like nothing had happened. No suitcase. No bags. No apology. Just a tired look and a forced sigh. I just needed some time, she said, dropping her keys on the counter. I didn't answer. She turned to me, slower now. Are you going to say anything? I held up the folder. Her face didn't even twitch. I figured you'd find it eventually, she said. That moment broke me more than the photos. More than the lies. More than the late-night texts or the perfume or the man on our couch. Because she wasn't sorry. She was ready. Ready for confrontation. Ready for war. And she thought she'd already won. But she had no idea who I was when cornered. No idea what I'd do when I realized everything in my life had been carefully, methodically dismantled by the person I trusted most. And as she stood there in my kitchen, speaking like a woman already halfway out the door, I realized something else. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She was afraid of being exposed. The call came the next afternoon. I was sitting on the edge of our bed. Well, my bed now, since she was sleeping at her sister's temporarily, or so she claimed, staring at a wall I'd painted 2 summers ago, while Jessa picked out the color and told me where I'd missed a spot. That memory should have made me nostalgic. Instead, it made me feel sick. Like even the paint had been part of a script I hadn't realized I was performing in. The phone buzzed. It was Graham. No hello. No small talk. Are you sitting down? I told him yes, even though technically I wasn't sure. It felt like my body had separated from everything else at this point. I found the real name behind Marlowe Systems, he said. It's a shell. No actual employees. No office. Just one owner. One listed founder. I waited. He gave me the name, and my stomach dropped so fast I nearly doubled over. Kevin Harrow. I didn't recognize it at first. It wasn't a name she'd ever spoken aloud to me. But Graham kept talking. Former VP of Product Development at Cosmere Advertising. Big player until he left suddenly last year. Guess who replaced him? I didn't have to guess. Jessa. Bingo. I stood up, phone pressed so hard to my ear it hurt. My heart was racing now, not because the pieces were confusing, but because they were falling together too clearly. It was like someone had been painting a portrait of my humiliation right in front of me, and I'd mistaken it for abstract art. Kevin Harrow wasn't just her affair partner. He was her mentor, her boss, the man who trained her, elevated her, left his position for reasons no one at the company could explain, and somehow kept sending her secret payments through a fake LLC. She'd replaced him, and then started seeing him. Ellery, Graham said slowly, I think you need to understand something. This wasn't just an affair. This was a power move. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Because everything started to make sense all at once, and I hated how clearly I could see it. Her fast promotion, the sudden pay raises, the new projects, the way she spoke about work like she was burdened by how brilliant everyone thought she was. She hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd been leveraging him. Or maybe he'd been leveraging her. Or maybe they were leveraging each other. And I was the idiot sitting at home, buying groceries and rewatching old sitcoms, thinking our silence over dinner was just the rhythm of long-term love. I asked Graham to dig deeper. I needed to know how far back this went. I needed records, emails, anything. He agreed. But before he hung up, he said something I'll never forget. You're not crazy. You're in a game you didn't know you were playing. But now that you know, don't just react. Document everything. That night, I went through our shared cloud storage. Not her phone, not her laptop. Just the stuff she forgot to unlink. And there it was. A recording. An audio file, unnamed, buried in a folder from over a year ago labeled Workshop Materials. It opened with her voice. But she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to Kevin. If we time it right, I can walk with half the assets. He's not paying attention. He never really does. Sweet guy, just passive. Kevin laughed in the background. And if he pushes back, we'll make sure he looks unstable. I've been planting seeds for months. Laughter again. That sound doesn't leave me. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I barely blinked. Because that moment didn't just confirm the betrayal, it confirmed premeditation. This wasn't passion gone wrong. This wasn't emotion overcoming logic. This was manipulation. Cold, ruthless, strategic. And I'd spent the last year of my life living with someone who looked me in the eyes every day and saw nothing but a mark. I copied the file, stored it in 3 separate encrypted folders. And then I sat down and began writing my own script. Because I wasn't going to be her scapegoat. And I wasn't going to let her leave this story in control of the ending. I always thought, when someone finds out they've been betrayed this deeply, they either scream or collapse. But the truth is stranger. Quieter. Like standing in the middle of a thunderstorm that refuses to make a sound. That's how I felt as I listened to that recording for the 3rd, 4th, 5th time. Each playback cutting deeper than the last. She'd called me passive. Sweet. The kind of man who wouldn't notice until it was too late. And maybe she was right, until now. I didn't sleep. Again, I paced through the dark house like a ghost walking his own crime scene, memorizing shadows and timelines. Every sound had weight. Every drawer she touched, every folder I opened, every half-lie I'd swallowed started replaying in sequence. I began writing a list. Not of what she'd done, but what I needed to do. I wasn't going to react like she hoped. No yelling. No confrontations. No public drama she could twist into an excuse. She wanted a breakdown. She needed a mess. So I gave her silence. I backed up everything. Emails, the folder, the bank records, the audio file. I stored it all on an encrypted drive and mailed a copy to a friend out of state, just in case. I contacted a lawyer, my own, this time, and requested a confidential consultation. And then I waited. 3 days passed without a word from her. That was unusual. Normally, she'd send a breadcrumb, a passive-aggressive text, a vague apology, some attempt to test my emotional temperature. But this time, nothing. Which meant she was planning something. I checked the P.O. box she'd used for her secret account. It was in her maiden name. So I created a burner identity and waited in the parking lot across the street. 12 hours later, I watched her pull up. Alone. No Kevin. She entered quickly, nervously, and came out with a thick yellow envelope. She didn't notice me. That was the point. I followed her. Not far. Not long. Just enough to see where she went next. A bank. Not ours. A private financial firm downtown. She entered with the envelope and didn't come out for nearly 40 minutes. When she did, she looked relieved. That told me everything. Whatever she was planning, she thought it was working. That night, she texted me. Can we talk this weekend? I feel like there's still a path forward. I didn't respond. Because by then, I'd already found something she didn't expect me to see. While she was busy erasing me from the financial picture, I was tracing her digital footprint with Graham's help. He'd been combing through the metadata of her cloud backups, even the deleted ones. And what he found wasn't just unsettling, it was criminal. Fraudulent documentation, Photoshop tax statements, falsified expense reports, all filed under a dummy consulting contract signed with Kevin's company. It wasn't just extra income, it was unreported, hidden, from both the IRS and her employer. She's laundering her own bonuses, Graham said over the phone. It's not just immoral, it's illegal. Especially if she's been filing jointly with you. If this hits the wrong audit, it'll drag you down with her. I sat there frozen, my fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. She wasn't just preparing to leave me. She was using me, my clean record, my social, my name, to shield herself while she siphoned income through fake contracts and concealed side deals. And if she filed for divorce while holding all the evidence? If she played the victim card hard enough, threw in a few strategically timed accusations, I'd be the one fighting for scraps in court. Worse, if the government got involved, I'd be on the hook for crimes I didn't commit. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall like some tragic husband in a movie. I went into the kitchen. I made tea. And I started planning her downfall. Not revenge. Not violence. Nothing reckless. Just facts. Clean. Cold. Precise. The way she never thought I could be. I'd let her play chess for months. But now, it was my turn to move. I had rehearsed 100 different endings in my head. The melodramatic confrontation, the courtroom fireworks, the slow, hollow collapse of two lives. None of them matched the quiet that actually happened. The final move didn't come with a shout or a smash. It landed like a key turning in a lock, decisive, final, and oddly gentle. First, the practical things. I took everything Graham and I had gathered, bank records, the audio file, the forged documents, and I walked into a lawyer's office with a folder so thick it felt like weight I could finally set down. The lawyer read it, then read it again, then put the folder on the table and said 3 words I will always be grateful for. We can do this. We didn't go to war publicly. That wasn't the point. What I wanted was to be safe, to make sure my name wasn't dragged through some staged narrative, and to make sure that whatever she had siphoned through fake contracts couldn't be weaponized against me. We sent cease and desist letters. We froze accounts where possible. We documented everything so meticulously that there was no room left for smoke and mirrors. A week later, her lawyer called. The tone was different, less swagger than I'd heard when she first hired him. Offers were made. Not because she suddenly had a conscience, but because facts have a way of changing bargaining positions. We negotiated quietly, like 2 adults untangling a knotted rope without trying to cut it in half. She signed documents. She agreed to return the funds she could and to step away from the company projects where the falsified paperwork lived. She agreed to mediation and compensation that would cover any potential tax exposure on my end. Did she get away scot-free? No. There were consequences, professional rebukes at her firm, an internal review that cost her reputation in ways she hadn't planned for. But there was no public spectacle, no viral humiliation. That silence felt, strangely, like mercy. For me, for her, for the life that had once existed between us. The last time we spoke in person, it was not dramatic. We met at a neutral mediator's office. She looked tired, smaller than the woman in those photos, less sure of herself. I didn't yell. I didn't try to humiliate her. I spoke plainly, about the pain, about the betrayal, about the months of feeling invisible. I told her that I forgave her, not for her sake, but because I needed to let go of the poison. Forgiveness was a tool to free myself, not an absolution for what she had done. She nodded. She said she was sorry. I accepted that apology the only way I knew how, by walking away and not carrying it like luggage. After the paperwork, after the lawyer bills, after the quiet agreements were signed, something unexpected happened. I felt empty and then, almost immediately, present. The hollow that had lived inside me since the first obvious lie slowly filled with small, stubborn life. I started with small things. I repainted the hallway. This time a color I chose because I liked it, not because she had liked it. I sold a few things we'd accumulated when we were trying to build a life together that made sense on paper. An espresso machine that took up more counter space than it deserved, a bookshelf of books I'd never read, but kept because she liked the cover. I reconnected with a few friendships that had faded while I was sleepwalking through our marriage. We went for long, plain walks where nothing had to be performed, and I learned how to breathe without carrying secrets inside me. At night, when the loneliness pushed in, I went to therapy. Saying out loud the things I'd felt, embarrassment, grief, the weird shame of being manipulated, was brutal and beautiful. My therapist said something I'll never forget. You didn't fail at loving. You failed at trusting someone who wasn't being truthful. Those are different things. I carried that sentence around like a talisman. Work became a refuge. I'd always liked building small things, woodworking, fixing old chairs, but I'd been too tired to make anything lately. I started making frames and coffee tables in afternoons, selling the finished pieces online. The work was honest and tactile, and, for the first time in a long time, mine. People bought my tables and sent messages about how they fit into evenings and kitchens and tiny apartments. Those messages felt like stitches slowly closing a wound. A few months later, I adopted a golden mutt from the local shelter. She had one ear that flopped the wrong way and a stubborn streak that fit my new rhythm. I named her Moth because she kept finding the little light in the darkest corners of the apartment. She slept against my feet and insisted on 2 walks a day. With a dog, the mornings changed. Coffee, the ritual of the leash, the simple joy of a creature that couldn't betray you or plan against you. Friends came back into the orbit. Some kept a polite distance at first, unsure of what to say. Others showed up with lasagna and bad jokes and an absurdly cheerful insistence that dinner would make everything better. It didn't make everything better overnight, but it reminded me that life has a way of reconstructing itself, slowly, with effort, with people who stick around for the small stuff. A year after the first photo, I stood at a small craft market with a handful of my tables pulled into a booth. My hands were strong from sanding and staining. My smile felt new and honest. People stopped and talked about wood and grain and where I sourced materials. A woman asked if I'd ever make bookshelves. I said yes, and we exchanged numbers. That night, I came home and sat on the couch with Moth, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like the house was mine again, not because of legal papers or settlements, but because I'd built a life inside it on purpose. I won't pretend everything was fixed like a neat final scene. Some nights the old ache returned, and sometimes I'd catch myself replaying the worst moments. But those nights grew fewer. The ache was replaced by a steady cadence of small, satisfying days. A client picking up a custom table, a message from a friend who'd stayed, a morning where I felt the sun through the kitchen window and didn't flinch. Ultimately, the ending wasn't about punishment. It was about reclaiming a life that had been quietly repurposed without my consent. I didn't need revenge to make things right. I needed facts, resolve, and a willingness to stay small and steady while the storm blew itself out. So I closed the foldergram and I had used to expose the truth. I put the recording on an encrypted drive and never listened to it again. I sent a final email to the attorney confirming the settlement. Then I took Moth to the park, and we watched a cinder block of a sunset fold into the horizon like something deliberate and kind. Sometimes the most surprising victories are the quiet ones. Keeping your integrity, rebuilding what you can, letting go of what you can't control, and making room for genuine happiness. That's the story I want to tell now. One about small, stubborn healing, and about the odd grace of starting over.